Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A massive protest was held in Israel in support of the 240 hostages taken captive by the terrorist group Hamas. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's in California discussing how Canada and the U.S. can work together to address the high cost of food. And we hear from both Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, who explain how the carbon tax is directly causing food inflation.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A massive fuel shortage in Gaza has now shut down all internet and phone networks in the region, essentially cutting off the besieged territory from the outside world. Palestinians in southern Gaza say they received evacuation notices as Israel appears to be diverting ground operations in the south, where most of Gaza's population is now gathering. Israeli troops searched the Shifa hospital in Gaza City for a second day and did allegedly find some evidence of the central Hamas command center, including some AK-47s and RPGs. Israeli military officials say the weapons were concealed beneath the complex. Meanwhile, friends and relatives of the 240 hostages held captive by the terrorist group Hamas took part in a protest march in the Israeli city of Gezer.
We are marching from the hostages square to Jerusalem, to the Prime Minister offices, to make sure that all the politicians, the Prime Minister itself, and the decision makers, the cabinet members won't forget about the hostages, won't forget about their faces, about the names, because it seems like they are not doing enough to bring them back.
Samaritan's Purse President Franklin Graham traveled to Israel and saw the areas devastated by the Hamas attacks last month. The Christian organization is helping displaced survivors with food and other relief. They're also providing 21 new ambulances for Israel's medical emergency system.
Terrorists came, shot through the door, and wounded the father in the leg. Then a bullet went through the baby's head that the wife was holding and into her shoulder. And then they set the house on fire and they jumped out the window and the husband was killed. And we're just about 2 miles from the border of Gaza. The terrorists came in, and this would be Hamas. And they went through this kibbutz systematically, just shooting and looting and burning.
There was a lot of bodies, a lot of also our members' bodies and the terrorist bodies.
But they took old people, they took young people, they took babies as hostages. Like a hand grenade right here on the floor, and you see where it blew up. And then it throws a shrapnel this direction and this direction. It's just evil. It's demonic as to what took place. A Samaritan's Purse in Israel is responding, and then we're helping work with churches, doing food vouchers for people that have been run out of their homes. We're helping replace some ambulances that were destroyed.
No, you leave us speechless. Right? We are all speechless. We are amazed with the amount of love, with the amount of hope that you bring.
The need is so great, but we serve a big God, and He's familiar with suffering. And so we're going to do what we can to help the people here. We pray that this community will come back stronger than ever. And Father, we come in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Wow, such devastation. Meanwhile, here in Canada, Vancouver police are addressing the amount of protests which have formed in this city since the attack by Hamas on Israel and the subsequent retaliation by Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip. There was one protest in particular which popped up featuring around 250 people in the city.
In this case, we did not have advance warning of this protest. It was a spontaneous protest or a pop-up protest, and we responded quickly, deploying approximately 100 officers from various parts of the city immediately in order to maintain order, restore order, maintain order, and to disperse the crowd. We expect in the coming days, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, there will be continued protests. We expect that people will continue to gather to express themselves. We will continue to deploy officers as necessary to help facilitate peaceful protests, to maintain order, and to respond to unlawful behavior. We encourage people, if they are choosing to gather, to do so lawfully and to do so respectfully of others and other people's points of view.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in San Francisco, California, discussing food insecurity and affordability during the APEC summit. With food prices going through the roof and record numbers of Canadians going to food banks, he says more needs to be done to help. Trudeau says lower food costs are key in making life more affordable for many of us here in North America. He says there are a number of contributing factors which are driving up food prices.
Whether it's climate change, which is damaging crops, changing growing seasons, reducing yields, and disrupting supply chains. We're seeing international events like Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, which has included a devastating blockade of global grain sources that's denying food to the world, especially in places in the global south threatened with food insecurity. And we also know that people around the world are going hungry, and people in the middle class are feeling real pressure at the checkout counter. So we've been taking action at home in Canada. We sent a grocery rebate to millions of people who need support. We've called on the country's largest grocers to stabilize prices, and we're holding them to account, looking at ways to strengthen Canada's Competition Act so consumers are always getting a fair choice. But we know people are also worried about continuing to get and afford nutritious food. So it's in this context that we're all here, to look at how we can lower costs for consumers. In Canada, we take a lot of pride in growing the crops and raising the livestock that feed the world.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas says there's one thing the Trudeau government could do to really help lower food prices, and that's to eliminate the carbon tax. She says inflation is also causing more people to go to food banks.
Here in Lethbridge, our numbers have increased drastically at food banks. They've nearly doubled in the last few years. And I think what's alarming about that is it's folks who are working full time. It's folks who, traditionally would have a fairly stable income and the ability to meet their daily necessities. But unfortunately, due to, economic struggle and just where we're at as a nation right now, due to, Prime Minister Trudeau's decisions, unfortunately, many Canadians are just not able to do that right now. And so they're having to resort to using a food bank on a regular basis.
MP Thomas will also discuss how the Trudeau government has failed in reaching their emissions targets, even with the federal carbon tax. She'll have more details coming up after business news. Federal Tory leader Pierre Poilievre says the carbon tax is directly causing food prices to skyrocket. He says it really comes down to how the tax has been impacting our farmers.
Right now, Trudeau's tax applies to heating barns and drying grains. That means that our farmers have to charge more for energy. I have a mushroom farm in my riding that spends tens of thousands of dollars on carbon taxes alone. That has to go on the price of mushrooms that you buy at the grocery store. It forces more of our food production to be outsourced to foreign countries. Trudeau's carbon tax applied on the CO2 that a tomato farm in my riding has to release into its greenhouse, even though that CO2 doesn't even go into the atmosphere, it goes into the plant life.
Canada's Trade Minister Mary Ng talked about Canada's current relationship with India, which appears to be strained still. Now, this follows the assassination of a Sikh separatist leader in British Columbia. Hardeep Singh Najjar, a naturalized Canadian citizen who was originally from the northern Indian state of Punjab, was gunned down last June. Ng says the investigation into his killing must run its course.
Right now, the focus for Canada is to let the work of the investigation proceed, and that's really important because, and you've heard me and the government talk about how important it is that that investigation happens, given that we had a Canadian, Canadian killed on Canadian soil. So we'll let that happen. I've said to Canadian businesses that it's that while they are continuing to do business in India, and my job as the trade minister is to make sure that the supports and the tools that are there to support Canadian businesses and investors in India continue to be available to them. So that's what we're doing for now.
Our city's chief financial officer says the economic situation here in Lethbridge is not good. Darryl Matthews painted the gloomy picture during recent Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee meetings. He says escalating economic challenges are being tied to inflation and interest rates and are poised to significantly affect land development here in our community. He says local developers are scaling back subdivisions and building activities, a trend expected to continue well into next year. In addition, he says the city's airport reserve will continue to see pressures due to the pullout of Air Canada and the ongoing negative impacts of the pandemic. In 2022, the airport reserve was increased by $3 million, but it's seen a continual decline. Matthews also says inflationary pressures and customer concern will impact city revenues until at least the year 2026. The CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, Trevor Lewington, says the message from our city's CFO is not really much of a shock.
I don't think it's a huge surprise to people. Everyone is experiencing inflation in their own households, right? You're paying more for your utilities. You're paying more to put fuel in your car. You're paying more at the grocery store. So it's no different for any organization, including the city of Lethbridge, which has to buy products and services and is paying more to do that. Likewise, you're probably noticing on your credit card or perhaps your mortgage, higher interest rates are starting to take a bite if you've had to renew. And just as the city has to renew its debts and refinance things, they're seeing higher payments. So those pressures are going to continue to take more out of the wallet for the city as well, just like the rest of us. The combined challenge is that the sources of revenue that the city has to pay for that inflationary impact is under pressure as well. So just as expenses are going up, there's the potential for revenues to go down, and that, of course, is not a great mixture.
Lewington adds that the 5.1% property tax increase over the current four-year budget cycle may not be sufficient enough for Lethbridge. He says council may have to potentially look into a property tax increase in the future or cutting back on city services. These tough economic times are taking their toll on nearly everyone, including our city's most vulnerable. 4 Lethbridge charities appeared before the city's Economic and Finance Standing Policy Committee during day 3 of their economic review process asking for help. Now, Habitat for Humanity, the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, Interfaith Food Bank, and the Lethbridge Food Bank each came forward with separate requests. The Standing Policy Committee voted unanimously to recommend City Council approve $150,000 from the Municipal Reserve, which would be divided equally between the 4 groups. That would give each nonprofit a total of $37,500 per year. Members agreed that although the economic outlook is a little grim, it's important to think about those facing poverty.
I was responding to a psychiatrist yesterday online who actually said that in his work, poverty is one of the most harmful factors, if not the most important factor, affecting people's mental health. If we can give more support to them and through them to the people of Lethbridge, I say let's do it.
When this budget came forward, we had no idea that we'd be in the times that we are. As much as we'd like to be able to do more, this will take it for the next couple of years, put it into budget, and hopefully at that time, the interest rates and inflation are a little more in line with what we have budgeted for. At least if there's some relief with this 37.5 breach organization, I would support that.
I would urge everyone in this room on both sides of the table to dig deep into their wallets and donate to these causes.
The Economic SBC also recommends the $150,000 amount to be included in the city's 2027 through 2030 operating budget. As you've heard on Bridge City News, the Alberta government is looking into the feasibility of pulling out of the Canada Pension Plan and creating a Made in Alberta version. Now, how realistic is this? To give us his thoughts is the former MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, Drew Barnes, who joins us now from the Hat. Drew, many seniors I've chatted with seem that they're quite concerned. They don't want the province touching their pensions. How do you think Premier Daniel Smith is helping to put some of those fears at ease?
It's about getting the correct information out. And that information includes the fact that let's not forget that Quebec has never, ever been a part of the Canada Pension Plan. It's clear that Albertans have contributed more than 50% of what's in the fund. And they say that today the average net expected return for a young person starting is like 2.3%. When inflation is 6 or 8%, that is not going to provide an adequate retirement. But I understand, seniors that have worked hard their whole lives, raised their family, built our cities, built Alberta, they want to ensure that the stability is there. And because Alberta's been the #1 provider, it's up to Premier Smith to absolutely clearly show that the stability is there. And we will be better off if we do it.
Now, a recent study commissioned by the province says our share of the CPP is around $343 billion, or around half. Now, I talked to friends in Ontario, Drew, who ask, how's that even possible that one province can contribute that much?
No, it absolutely is correct because of the fact that we have the youngest working force, we have the highest wages, we contribute the most, and we between 3 and 5 billion receive annually less than we put in. And of course, since 1965, when this started, that $3 to $5 billion has added up tremendously. No, it's clear that the lion's share of that fund has been raised because of Albertans' hard work and Albertans' benevolence for the rest of Canada. And how a lot of Albertans I talk to, of course, we love Canada and we want to help our neighbors across all of Canada. But what's clear is the economy in the Maritimes hasn't improved. Alberta and Saskatchewan are usually the only two have provinces. All this money that Alberta has poured into the Canadian Confederation has harmed Alberta and hasn't helped other Canadians.
Premier Daniel Smith says more studying really needs to be done to see if it's in Alberta's best interest to create a homemade pension plan, along with hosting a referendum. Now, Drew, the province says an APP would not look anything like Quebec's pension plan. So in your opinion, how would it be different?
Well, be different in a lot of ways. First of all, the Canadian pension plan only invests about 8% of its assets into Alberta companies. And of course, Alberta, our population is around 14% of Canada. Our economy is 30% of Canada. We deserve more right there. So we're going to put in safeguards can be put in so all pension money can be protected and grow at a lot higher rate than the current Canada pension plan. That's what needs to be done.
Drew, many of our viewers want to know what you've been up to since you left provincial politics. So let me ask you, how have you been keeping busy in the Medicine Hat region?
Thanks for that, Hal. It's been great. First of all, I'm very, very blessed. Wonderful family and 3 grandkids, so lots of time there. Politically, though, I have formed a political action committee and a foundation. We've continued to stay involved in Alberta politics, and we've continued to write and put things out. And I'm watching very, very closely. I absolutely know that Alberta should be the free and most prosperous place anywhere. And I believe that Premier Smith and the UCP government has to take stronger action than they have so far to make that happen. And I'm watching for the opportunity to, be on the side of Alberta families, Alberta children, and Alberta being free and prosperous.
Drew Barnes, former independent MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, thanks so much for your time today. You know, a lot of the snow we received in Lethbridge has melted and even warmer temperatures are on the way. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. We saw a little bit of flurry activity earlier today in Lethbridge, but a lot of the snow has already started to melt, thank goodness. Tonight, expect a few clouds developing with a low near +1. Friday, there should be lots of sunshine in the forecast with a balmy high of 10. Even warmer on Saturday with a high near 13 degrees, a great time for barbecue. Sunday, cooling off slightly under a mainly cloudy sky with a high of 7. Monday, more sunshine developing with a high of 2. Tuesday, mixture of sun and cloud and a high near +1. And cooling off slightly on Wednesday under a mainly cloudy sky with the temperature dropping down to -3. Now, the average high for this time of year is 4 degrees and an average low of -8. The record high was 19 degrees set way back in 1943, and the record low, look at that, was a very cold -31 in 1959. The sun rose at 7:45 and set at 4:47 p.m. Let's see how the rest of the country is shaping up for Friday. It should be partly cloudy with a high of 10 degrees for Victoria, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 9 for Vancouver. Expect lots of sunshine and a high of 13 degrees in both Calgary and Edmonton. Just a few clouds and 3 degrees is on tap for Regina. Mostly sunny and 9 degrees for Saskatoon. A few clouds and 5 degrees is expected in Winnipeg on Friday. Now in the central part of the country, expect rain and 13 degrees for Toronto. Rain as well in Ottawa with a high near 12. Showers at 15 for Montreal. Over in Atlantic Canada, it should be partly cloudy and 11 in Fredericton. Mostly sunny and 10 degrees for Halifax. Just a few clouds and 9 for Charlottetown. And in St. John's, expect rain mixed with flurries and a high reaching 3 degrees on Friday. The Canadian government is being called upon to do more to level the playing field for small business owners. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business said it wants Ottawa to take on e-commerce giant Amazon by modernizing competition laws. Now, in a news release, CFIB Executive Vice President of Advocacy, Corinne Pullman, says small businesses face an uphill battle in trying to expand and reach more customers while competing with online giants. The CFIB represents around 97,000 of Canada's small businesses. Amazon is investing in its first ever Canadian wind farm. The US-based tech giant says it will partner with developer Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners on a 495-megawatt wind farm to be built in Vulcan County here in southern Alberta. Amazon says it will purchase the renewable electricity produced at the site to help power its local operations in the province. That includes its web services data center and its fulfillment centers. Globally, Amazon is committed to powering its entire operations with renewable energy by the year 2030. The tech company says it has 479 wind and solar projects around the world, including 4 solar farms here in Canada. General Motors has become the first of the Detroit automakers to seal a deal with unionized workers. A vote-tracking spreadsheet posted to the United Auto Workers Union website shows that the contract passed by more than 3,400 votes, with 54.7% in favor to accept. A union spokesperson also confirmed the spreadsheet has the official totals. As of Thursday, the contract had a big lead in voting at both Ford and Stellantis, with 66.7% voting in favor of the new deal. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 4 points on the day to finish at 20,053. The Dow was down 45 points to 34,945. The S&P 500 was up 5 points on the day to 4508, and the Nasdaq was up 9 points to 14,113. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $3.73 on the day to $72.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 14 cents to $3.05 US. Gold was up $21.45 on the day to $19.8130 US an ounce, and silver was up 31 cents to $23.75 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.17 per bushel, barley's at $7.16. Canola's at $16.15, and corn is at $8.46 per bushel. Live cattle December contract was down $3.03 to $174.75. Feeder cattle were down 5 cents to $229.38, and lean hogs were up 43 cents to $71.48. That again is for the December contract. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $72.70 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, 4 nonprofit groups here in Lethbridge will be receiving some much-needed help from the city during these very difficult financial times. The Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, Habitat for Humanity, the Interfaith, and Lethbridge Food Banks will each be receiving a financial boost of $37,500 per year. The Economic SBC also recommended this amount to be included in the city's 2027 through 2030 operating budget. You know, the federal carbon tax is hurting so many Canadians, including our farmers. Coming up, we're going to chat with Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Thomas, who explains how the tax is severely impacting many in our agricultural communities. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, stop by our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Southminster United Church is hosting their annual Christmas Tea and Bazaar on Saturday, November 18th from 2 to 4 p.m. in Southminster Hall. Enjoy this fancy tea with finger sandwiches and dainty treats. Plus, browse many items at the bazaar such as baking, crafts, jewelry, and other Christmas surprises. Tickets are $12 and will be available at the door. Discover unique finds for all the people on your Christmas list at the Lethbridge Handmade Market on Saturday, December 2nd at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center's UFA Hall. Over 115 handmade artisans will be on hand to show their various crafts, art, jewelry, and all kinds of things. The market opens at 9 a.m. with a $7 admission. Kids 14 and under enter for free. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Foot Friday, and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
New polls suggest that the Trudeau Liberals are plummeting in popularity. The recent numbers show that the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives in the lead with around 41% support, followed by the Liberals a distant second with just 22% and the NDP at 20%. They're almost neck and neck. Many attribute the recent 11-point drop by the Liberals to their carbon tax. Now, to chat about this tax in more detail is Lethbridge Conservative MP and Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage, Rachel Thomas, who joins us now from the Windy City. Rachel, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hi, Hal. So nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, the Liberals, supported by the Bloc, voted against pausing the carbon tax on all forms of home heating. That didn't sit well with many of us here in the West who wanted the same break as Atlantic Canadians who were seeing a 3-year pause on the tax for their home heating oil.
Yeah, Hal, I think, what ended up happening was Trudeau saw that his numbers in Atlantic Canada were plummeting. And of course, in an effort to salvage his relationship with those out east, he determined that he would bring forward a carve out in terms of the carbon tax for those who heat their homes using oil. Now, we know that this is only 3% of Canadians. And so while it helps them for the next 3 years, it's definitely still a huge detriment to those who use natural gas, let's say, to heat their homes, which of course is the vast majority of Canadians. So unfortunately, 97% of Canadians are left out in the cold still, having to pay an astronomical carbon tax on top of their home heating bill. And of course, I'm hearing from local residents here in the community of Lethbridge who are saying this really is adding to the tremendous burden that they're facing with regards to affordability and being able to make ends meet. And so it's really sad, actually, that the Prime Minister is choosing to divide our country in this way by choosing one region over another, rather than doing something that would be in the benefit of all Canadians.
It really is an affordability crisis. We're seeing our utility rates, the electricity providers. I mean, some of the bills I'm getting $200-300 a month. And then, of course, now that winter's going to be setting in, you're right, the natural gas, that's going to be going up by quite a bit with our consumption. Now, there was actually a debate on a carbon tax carve-out for our farmers. How did that go?
Yeah, for sure. So there was actually 2 debates, if you don't mind. So there was one where we actually asked for the carbon tax pause, the 3-year pause, to be applied to all forms of home heating. And unfortunately, the Bloc and the Liberals voted against that. And so that did not come to pass. And then we brought forward as Conservatives another initiative, which was to carve out the carbon tax from farmers. So, of course, these are the individuals who are working hard to feed Canadians, and they're needing to heat their barns and they're needing to run their equipment and dry their grain. And all of this comes with an additional carbon tax added to the fuel that they're using for this. And so we've brought forward a private member's bill to take the carbon tax off of the fuel that is used by farmers. It was successful in the House of Commons. It went to the Senate, and it was debated there. Witnesses were heard from, and of course, it was an overwhelming message of support for the carbon tax to be removed. However, senators were promptly instructed by Liberal ministers who, gave them phone calls and sent them emails and very much applied pressure to them. It was encouraged that senators would try to stall the process as much as possible. And so the senators have certainly followed that directive. And so as of last week, the bill kind of came to a halt. That said, next week, the senators are going to be faced with a really tough choice. And ultimately, they're going to have to decide, do they support our farmers and driving down food costs, or do they support Trudeau and wanting to drive up those costs by applying a punitive carbon tax. And the senators are going to have to make that decision. And of course, Canadians are very much wanting to make their voices heard. And so many of them are writing to senators or calling senators and asking them to vote in favor of this private member's bill that would remove the carbon tax. Because of course, at the end of the day, they know that this is going to result in lower food prices for all Canadians.
Because right now, you're right, the food prices are going through the roof. The carbon tax impacting our farmers, our truckers, and we're seeing record numbers of Albertans and Canadians going to food banks.
Yeah, and that's overwhelming as well, just in terms of the concern that is caused there. Here in Lethbridge, our numbers have increased drastically at food banks. They've nearly doubled in the last few years. And I think what's alarming about that is it's folks who are working full time. It's folks who, traditionally would have a fairly stable income and the ability to meet their daily necessities. But unfortunately, due to, economic struggle and just where we're at as a nation right now, due to, Prime Minister Trudeau's decisions, unfortunately, many Canadians are just not able to do that right now. And so they're having to resort to using a food bank on a regular basis.
Now, a recent report shows that the Trudeau government has failed in nearly every single one of their emissions targets. So, Rachel, if that's the case, why continue with the carbon tax?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely one that is backed by common sense for sure. Unfortunately, I think Prime Minister Trudeau just doesn't operate in that realm of common sense thinking, and so for him, it's very much about pushing forward an ideology without results. And so the ideology, of course, is that we need to do what's best for the planet. And in his mind, a carbon tax is what's best. Even though, to your point, metrics have not been met. Those objectives that the government said that they were going to be able to achieve just have not been achieved at all. And so as a result, then you have Canadians who are paying more and more. And as you mentioned, this is having a dramatic impact on how they're living life, including the use of a food bank. We also know that 1 in 5 Canadians are missing meals in order to try to make ends meet. We know folks are not having access to the nutrition that they need to have access to, again, just because of affordability. And so removing the carbon tax would really make a huge difference in terms of what we pay for the fuel we put in our vehicles, or the heat that we use for our homes, or the groceries that we buy to put on our table. And so it's really sad. It's very unfortunate that Prime Minister Trudeau is not willing to let go of this ideological framework of his.
So, Rachel, the Liberals' Rural Economic Development Minister Hutchings says the Prairie should really elect more Liberals if they want their voices heard on carbon pricing. Well, we have 2, George Chahal in Calgary, Randy Boissonneau in Edmonton. I guess that's not enough?
Well, in my mind, it's too many, actually, Hal. But nevertheless, to your point, yes. So these 2 individuals are Liberal members of Parliament here in the province of Alberta. And yes, you're correct. The minister did say that if Canadians, if more people in Alberta, she said, want to have their voices heard, then they need to elect more Liberals. Well, here's these 2 Liberal MPs who totally ignored the voices of their constituents and instead voted to toe the party line. And I think, again, what's sad about this is that the daily reality of Canadians is not being taken into account, but rather, this false ideological framework is being followed. And, I'm hearing from people here in my riding, but across Canada, who just cannot continue in this way. They're having to make huge sacrifices for themselves, for their family, just to try to survive. But it's coming to a place of great desperation. So we really need the Liberals to hear Canadians and to do the common sense thing. And the common sense thing is to scrap the carbon tax.
Rachel, Bill C-11, or the Online Streaming Act, will be moving ahead. The federal government gave the CRTC its orders so that the legislation will be implemented. So what does that really mean now for a lot of online content creators?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. As heritage critic, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, something that I follow quite closely. And so Bill C-11 ultimately gives the CRTC, the regulatory arm of the government, the ability to control what people can see, what they can say, what they can hear online. And so it will have a huge impact on our ability to use the internet as Canadians. It will impact what we're able to access through our streaming apps, whether that's Disney Plus or Netflix or Crave. It'll have an impact on what we're able to view through YouTube. It'll have an impact on our use of podcasts and the way that we access information there. And so really what we'll see is more and more information will be curated by the government and the way that they want Canadians to view things, rather than Canadians being in control of what they want to see.
You know, that's very concerning as well, because us here at Bridge City News, our team, we have over 16,000 subscribers to our YouTube channel. Since Meta blocked a lot of the Canadian content on our Facebook page, where we had around 45,000 followers. So it's making it a lot harder for those of us in independent media to get the message out, get the truth out. Rachel, the Bank of Canada says we may not see 1 or 2% for an overnight rate for quite a while. In fact, we may even see another increase from the current 5% to help get inflation in check. Now, you speak with your constituents all of the time. How is this higher interest rate really impacting Albertans?
Yeah. So again, like the carbon tax, certainly when interest rates go up, it has a huge impact on people's ability to afford the necessities of life. And so, when interest rates go up, it impacts, the expense of our mortgages, it impacts our rent costs, it impacts food costs, it impacts everything really, because, things within our economy are so much backed by loans. And when the loan interest rate goes up, then of course, those that are selling those goods that we're purchasing also have to increase the cost. And so that said, it is having a huge impact on those in Lethbridge. I'm speaking to people who bought a home, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago at a rate of 2 or 3%, and now they're, maybe looking to remortgage in the next year, and they don't know how they're going to do it. They're feeling the crisis of having to pay, 1.5 to 2 times more for their mortgage. And at the end of the day, their paycheck hasn't gone up. And so it's a huge detriment to them. In addition to that, you have folks who are paying rental costs, and, with fewer and fewer, places to live that are available to folks, they're just kind of trapped. And their rental costs are, going up on them, but they don't have any other options. And so again, they're feeling at a place of detriment. I think it's important to note that really it didn't need to be this way. The reason we're at this place is because the government decided to spend an astronomical amount of money, and that's really what caused inflation to skyrocket. Which then, of course, when inflation skyrockets, the cost of everything goes up, and then the bank tries to respond by increasing interest rates in order to slow spending. At the end of the day, everybody gets hurt. And so I think that's really what we're seeing. We're seeing Canadians in crisis mode.
You're talking about mortgage rates, and I just came off a 4-year closed mortgage at 2.79, and I renewed for a 3-year closed at 5.05. Or no, 5.09. And right now that 3-year closed mortgage has jumped up to about 6.5%, 7%. So it's just unbelievable. You're right. A lot of people are finding it more difficult to make their mortgage payments, or maybe they'll have to downsize or even possibly rent again. Now, you recently posted on social media that our country's Heritage Minister, Pablo Rodriguez, gave $130,000 to Laith Marouf, a person who has a history of anti-Semitism. Ironically, he was given the funds to help with anti-racism training. Now, when you asked the minister about this at committee, what happened?
Yeah, we had the opportunity to ask the minister about this, a number of months ago. And when he was brought forward to committee and asked questions with regard to this incident, where $130,000 was given to Laith Marouf, the minister, claimed ignorance, that he wasn't aware. But we have documents now that have come to us in recent weeks that actually reveal that the minister did know, that emails were sent to him, that he was made aware. And so, to know that the minister misled committee is alarming in and of itself. But I think what's more alarming in this case is that you have an anti-Semite, and I mean a raging public anti-Semite. His entire social media accounts were plastered with the most vile posts one can imagine. And this individual was given over $130,000. These are taxpayer dollars. These are Canadians' dollars. And to be given to a man like this to do, supposed anti-racism training is just unfathomable. It's I'm flabbergasted by it, as are many Canadians. And so more recently, we found out that Laith Marouf was ordered to pay the money back, of course, but actually, more than 8 months have passed and not a single dime has been returned. And the Canadian government doesn't seem to have any motivation to go after him and to make sure that that's the case. And I think that's really alarming, to know that Canadian dollars, went toward this individual and that the government's not taking responsibility to reclaim that.
Rachel, you blasted our country's public broadcaster, the CBC, in calling them out for spreading dangerous, quote, misinformation during the Israel-Hamas war. Can you explain?
I did, Hal. And the reason for this is because the CBC is a public broadcaster. And so it's the responsibility of the Heritage Committee to hold it to account. At the end of the day, the CBC receives $1.4 billion from Canadian taxpayers. And so we expect them to report news that is accurate, news that is fair, news that is fact-based. And what ended up happening was it came to my attention that the CBC actually instructed its journalists to refrain from calling Hamas terrorists. Now, Hamas has been referred to as a terrorist organization officially by the government of Canada since 2002, so for more than 20 years. So for the CBC to make this decision, I thought was actually, incredibly alarming and actually dangerous. But further to that, you'll recall that there was an attack on a hospital in Gaza, and the CBC reported that it was Israel that attacked the hospital and that hundreds of civilians died. And they did this because they received their information directly from Hamas. And so really functioning as a mouthpiece for this terrorist organization. Now, of course, it came to light very quickly after that actually Israel wasn't responsible. And actually, it wasn't the hospital that was hit. It was actually the parking lot. And so even despite these facts coming to light, the CBC refused to do a redaction and they refused to apologize for misleading Canadians. This is dangerous because what we saw was an incredible uptake in anti-Semitic behavior and rhetoric. And ultimately hatred towards the Jewish population within Canada, therefore putting them in danger. These are the types of things that result when a news agency, and especially a public broadcaster, doesn't take the time to get it right. And so it's incredibly alarming, actually, that the CBC did this and that they're refusing to take responsibility.
That's something we always preach here at Bridge City News as well. We'd rather be correct than first. Some news organizations are like, let's get it out there. Do we know for sure? Don't worry about it. We'll retract later if we have to. And I'm like, no, that's a dangerous policy for any news organization. Rachel, before we let you go, what are your thoughts on the UCP looking into potentially pulling out of the Canada Pension Plan and creating our very own Alberta Pension Plan, which would apparently put more money into our seniors' pockets? Now, Premier Daniel Smith says more studying has to be done and a referendum will be held on the subject first. But what are your thoughts of pulling out of the CPP?
Well, I certainly appreciate that Ms. Smith is taking the time to listen to Albertans and, trying to do as many town halls as possible and get people to weigh in on this decision. At the end of the day, the reason why she's put in this position where this decision is even coming up is because the Prime Minister has actually divided our country. He's pitted one region against another, one sector against another, one way of life against another. And so as a result, Albertans are feeling incredibly misunderstood and ill-represented. Our energy sector has been under attack for an entire 8 years while Prime Minister Trudeau has been, in power. Further to that, our farmers have been scapegoated on multiple fronts and not given the support that they need. Further to that, just our Western way of thinking and our work ethic has not been appreciated for what it is. And so as a result, Canadians are hurting. Seniors are hurting. And so, we're in this place where there's this financial crisis that has hit so many homes in the province of Alberta. And where people are really wondering whether or not they have a voice in, Canada's Confederation, and what our future is to be. And so, unfortunately, it's due to Justin Trudeau's policies and his desire to pit region against region that we're in this position to begin with. So, I think it can be assured that under a Conservative government, we wouldn't actually be having this discussion because I think we'd be unified as a country from coast to coast, and people would be empowered to work within strong sectors of their choosing. And to bring home powerful paychecks. And so Canada would be in a much better place altogether.
So do you think we should pull out, though? Do you think we should pull out of the CPP? Go our own with an APP?
Yeah, it's ultimately up to the Albertan people to decide. They're going to be the ones to make that decision.
Lethbridge Conservative MP and Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage, Rachel Thomas, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Hal. Great to be with you.
Beyond its traditional reputation as the oil and gas powerhouse of Canada, Alberta is also making headlines in a different frontier, that of Bitcoin mining. One of the leaders in this innovative charge is Sue Ennis. She is a dedicated champion of technology, investment, and the exciting opportunities right here in our own backyard. Miss Ennis is the VP of Corporate Development for Hut 8, one of Canada's premier companies in the crypto mining and high-performance computing area. Sue, welcome to Bridge City News.
Hey guys, great to connect with you. Excited to get into it today. Lots going on in crypto these days.
I know, it's a great industry and a great topic of discussion for so many. Now, Hut 8 is one of Canada's largest data infrastructure operators and Bitcoin miners. Can you maybe give us a snapshot in layman's terms of what exactly it is that Hut 8 does and its significance in the cryptocurrency landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So miners are an integral piece of the entire Bitcoin blockchain and Bitcoin network. So you can kind of look at miners as being like the Fed in the sense that we mint new Bitcoins and also help secure the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's the big role of miners on the Bitcoin blockchain. And then, yeah, in terms of Hut 8, we are one of the oldest miners in the industry. We've been in Alberta since late 2017, early 2018. And then in January of 2022, we actually started buying traditional high-performance compute data centers because we're also incredibly bullish on the growth of the high-performance computing cloud colo AI space. And so, yeah, that's Hut 8. It's effectively just a big portfolio of composable compute infrastructure that also includes Bitcoin mining.
Well, that's great. And it sounds like Hut 8 operates in an absolutely rapidly evolving market. That probably goes without saying. How do you keep up with the latest technological advancements and market trends to ensure that the company stays ahead of the curve in the crypto industry?
Yeah, so I think one of the big advantages is our team's experience. So our CEO, Jamie Leverton, she doesn't come from the crypto space. She's actually her background is in the traditional high performance compute and distressed data infrastructure space. So she's been in charge of transformation mandates for the likes of IBM, BlackBerry, Cogeco. Our CFO also came from IBM. I myself have been in crypto since late 2016, early 2017. And then we have a team that's got really robust and a depth of experience in the energy space. So I think all of us together take different points of view and have a different lens and sort of pulse on, different areas of not only just crypto, but energy, the economy, computing trends, relationships with Dell, NVIDIA. So yeah, I think that helps us all come together holistically and really continue to move the needle forward in terms of innovation.
One of the challenges associated with cryptocurrencies is their volatility. How does Hut 8 navigate the fluctuations in the market, and what strategies do you employ to mitigate risks for both company and investor?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we have certainly focused on as a Bitcoin miner, and actually with respect to volatility, we have certainly, Bitcoin, for example, is the main cryptocurrency that we mine and the only cryptocurrency really that we deal with. And Bitcoin has been around for quite a few years, definitely well over a decade. And we've actually seen the volatility start to taper off, relatively speaking, relative to its historical trading patterns. And one of the things, though, that Hut 8 does as a miner, in order to reduce some of the volatility that can come from being a single-threaded miner, is we focus on diversification of our business. So we are not only miners, but we are also in the cloud and co-location space, which is a industry that is not correlated to Bitcoin price action, and we're also very diversified in terms of how we look at our growth trajectory. We're in the middle of a merger right now. I can't really get too into it, but you can certainly follow me on Twitter at BigSuey or hut8.com to keep up to date on that. But even in a post-merger world, our focus really is on diversification, bringing in more fiat-based revenues on top of being a Bitcoin miner.
One of the things that is in the news right now is the idea of the central bank digital currencies. Do you see that they would be competing with cryptocurrencies? What, in your opinion, maybe are the main differences and how that interaction is going to come into play with a Canadian central bank digital currency?
Yeah, so we actually see the creation of a Canadian Central CBDC quite bullish actually for the adoption of Bitcoin because it will get the general public and the masses comfortable and more familiar with doing things like transacting with money online, having a wallet, peer-to-peer payments, using digital payment rails. So all of that we think will naturally lend to people becoming more comfortable and perhaps learning more about Bitcoin because it might take some of the perhaps esoteric concepts such as sending digital money over the internet away. It might take some of that sort of mystique away. And in terms of main differentiators, well, we touched into it briefly before. Bitcoin is not controlled by a single entity. There are no intermediaries that can determine who can or cannot transact with Bitcoin. It's also a global network, and effectively anyone can participate or use the peer-to-peer Bitcoin network as long as you have access to an internet and a wallet or a cell phone.
Right. It makes sense that these various currencies, the sovereign ones, the national ones, they're actually going to fit hand in glove with other coins or tokens that are in somebody's wallet. Do you see that there being then a positive impact on the crypto market?
Yeah, like I said, I think that if citizens have the option to learn, we do think that this will naturally lend to more learning and more education just about how digital currencies work, what are payment rails on the internet, and that it will take, again, out some of the mystery that comes along with transacting using digital currencies.
But it seems to me like the SEC is struggling to find an existing box to put cryptocurrencies into. I don't know if you've been following that issue, but what do you make of it?
Yeah, so I think what I make of what's been happening with regulators is that the conversation has certainly gone, because again, I've been in the crypto space since 2017. So the conversation has certainly matured and grown from let's just shut it down, let's just regulate it out of existence to, okay, let's make sure we have parameters so that everyone can innovate safely. And then if we look at the actual adoption curve, the amount of on-ramps have grown. You now see players like Fidelity, BlackRock, Invesco all submitting applications for spot Bitcoin ETFs, already offering other types of structured product that can help their institutional clients invest in the cryptocurrency space. There's something like 45 CBDC projects happening right now globally with governments. And so it's actually a really exciting time because there certainly is more of a constructive rhetoric that's happening between innovators in the space and regulators than we've ever seen before. And like we said, like I was saying, if BlackRock does in fact get a spot ETF approved, which does look like it's probably going to happen, BlackRock has a 99.8% success rate with ETF applications. Again, we all think this is very bullish for the industry.
Now, Sue, considering your extensive background in the financial industry, how do you foresee the future of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, especially in terms of the adoption and government regulatory frameworks?
So I think that there's just going to be a world where there's more safe and regulated on-ramps for institutional customers, retail investors who may not know or understand a lot about cryptocurrency to learn about it, have on-ramps for safe trading and investment into the space as another, perhaps active sleeve of the alt investment sleeve of their portfolio. So again, it's all very bullish.
It makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if you want to get into some of the avenues, but would you be interested in maybe sharing with our viewers some of the options that might become available? I'm thinking maybe personally staking, but are there other opportunities that this will actually enable John Q. Public to go to his bank and have this option?
Yeah, so I think certainly the opportunity to earn yield with different types of instruments, cryptocurrency definitely unlocks. If you look at digital payment rails on top of systems such as gaming, the metaverse, there's a lot of different sort of like functionalities and use cases for crypto and blockchain rails that again we think will become more relevant. So I think another thing for example, that I was actually on a show talking about a few days ago was the rise of DPIN networks. So that's effectively physical networks being connected, and then users being rewarded for contributing data to those physical networks, users being rewarded with tokens or payments on the blockchain. So for example, imagine a world where I am driving my car and I have a dash cam set up, and effectively there's like an AI video camera in the dash cam, excuse me, that's watching my every move as I'm driving through the city or whatever, and collecting data and feeding that data into, let's say, a central repository where other drivers on the road can then get in real time, okay, this is what's happening on the road, these are the conditions, et cetera. And then I can then get rewarded via a blockchain-based network into my digital asset wallet, a few tokens, some rewards for participating in that data dissemination in real time. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It makes absolute sense.
Yeah, that I think are really cool.
Blockchain technology is fundamental to cryptocurrencies. Could you explain what blockchain is and how it underpins the functioning of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin?
Yeah, you can kind of look at blockchains as railroads. And then the currencies that run on top of them are the railroad cars. So they're interconnected networks that run on top of the internet. Some of them are permissioned, so only certain players can drive their rail cars on top of those rails. And then some of them are open, which means that anyone can drive a rail car on top of those rails. Another benefit of open source blockchains is that it's kind of like a public bulletin board. So this is one of the other features of Bitcoin, is that anyone in real time can see, who has balances where, what transactions have been taking place, what transactions are currently taking place. And so they really help facilitate accountability, auditability, transparency, and that's one of the real main benefits of blockchains.
In your opinion, what role does public awareness play in the acceptance of the integration of cryptocurrency into everyday transactions? And maybe what steps can be taken to increase this awareness globally?
Yeah, so again, I think things like on-ramps, so making it more easily accessible for the average Joe Blow to get on and transact using cryptocurrencies are certainly very helpful. Again, more regulatory parameters to make it safer to play and innovate in some of these systems. Again, a government-backed CBDC would also lend another or does lend another air of, I think, credibility to the whole space, just because again it's also digital, it's also involving money on the internet. So I think all of these things that we're starting to see from a regulatory perspective, from an on-ramp perspective, from a large institutional players now getting invested into it, are all very bullish in terms of getting it on people's radars.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting time, and I'm positive myself personally that the opportunities are endless with crypto.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sue, thank you so much. We really appreciate your insight into the digital domain of crypto. Thank you very much for joining us here on Bridge City News.
Thank you so much, guys. Happy to be back on anytime. Bye.